Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 250 of Optimal Living Advice, the podcast where we take any questions you might have about the many struggles of life and get them answered for you here on the show. I am your host, certified life coach Greg Audino, reminding you before we begin that if you have a question you would like help with on the show, we welcome you to email it to us at advice@oldpodcast.com. And today's question is very important indeed. Our asker is having a really hard time with the idea of aging as she nears her 60th birthday. She suddenly feels as though her senior years are a reality and isn't sure what to expect or how to prepare. Can't blame her. This is something that is not talked about or covered very often, but I will get into more about that. First, let's hear what she's got to say. Greg, I am 59 now, turning 60 in a few short months. I should say that I'm active, I'm in good health, and have a good relationship with my children. It scares me, however, to think about the next phase of life. I do everything I can to stay young, but turning 60 is something I could have never imagined before the last 5 years. I'm very nervous and don't feel ready for what life as a senior citizen will be like. All of a sudden, I'm getting old. I'd like to ask if you have answered questions from older people before and what types of issues they face, and how they deal with them. It doesn't seem like anyone thinks about this until they absolutely have to. Very good question, asker. Thank you. A unique question, too, though I wish it wasn't. It would be great if more people were willing to confront this and look for help in navigating this tough transition the way that you have. But many of the people who do struggle with this don't reach out for help. And that's due to a couple of reasons, both of which really blend in with the bulk of your question and how I'll answer it about what hardships to expect as an elderly person. One, as we get older, there's the belief that change becomes more and more difficult. Like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I should say, though, that I've not come across any research that supports this one way or the other. The opinion from behavioral scientists seems to be that it's not true. And I, too, would assume that change is only difficult or only more difficult, not for older people necessarily, but rather for those who are currently resisting change or have made a habit of resisting it in the past. I do think it's easier to find yourself in that position as an elderly person for a variety of reasons. But again, I've not heard of any link established between age and the impossibility of change. That's just me, though. There are a lot of things I haven't heard of. But Even if an elderly person might not come to this conclusion about themselves on their own, it's the commentary surrounding it. Thanks to idioms like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's enough to change the mind of someone who wouldn't think critically on their own. So then why ask for help if change feels increasingly out of reach? Instead, one is left to sit with nothing but the realization of what their life has equated to. Working on acceptance in this space is good, but you could see how it would be a difficult process, essentially based on a lie in the first place about not being able to change. And the second reason people might not reach out the way that you have is sadly because there aren't many resources. There is a shortage of psychologists trained to work especially with the elderly, and there's a shortage of research being done on mental health of the elderly. It's unfortunate that more students don't want to undertake this, and, it only fuels the idea that change is out of reach for those who are much older. Actually, I might add a third reason to the pile, too. A third factor that might cause people to not reach out for help and that one might expect to be an ongoing struggle in the senior years. And that is actually what you just said about 60 being unimaginable and people not thinking about this until it's too late. For much of our lives, we tend to feel very distant, like distant strangers from older versions of ourselves. Look, younger listeners, right now, try to imagine you at 20 years older than you currently are, sitting across from you. Now, as I look across the room at my couch and try to envision 50-year-old me sitting on it, I can imagine what he might look like, but he doesn't seem like me. It doesn't feel like we're connected as the same person, even when I try. He still seems like another person. That's just me that would be me at 50, let alone me at 70 or older. So aside from some retirement planning, we tend to be very out of touch with our older selves and don't do a good job planning our lives for when we get there because of that. Anyway, Sadly, this is what I've talked about so far is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to problems one might face in old age. No, to answer your question, no, I have not taken many questions from older listeners, and even my oldest clients in my coaching have been your age. But if you're asking me to speculate, I really don't think it's hard to do. Put yourself in the shoes of many elderly people. We talked about feeling detached from this version of ourselves. We talked about not having many mental health professionals at their disposal. We talked about feeling as though change is too hard or not worth it. What else? Well, they're talked to like children. They might feel like burdens. They're often perceived as incapable in the eyes of others, which in and of itself is hard. Not to mention how easy it is for them to feel that way themselves due to legitimate physical and mental limitations. They'll wonder about wrong, irreversible choices they've made in their lives. Their daily talks are about what type of illness or discomfort they're suffering from. They're facing their mortality for likely the first time, as many of us actively avoid these thoughts when we're younger, which I think is ludicrous. So the list goes on. Again, not every elderly person will fall into all of these rabbit holes, but it's very easy to. So, look, I can't pretend like I've been there, and I am one of the many I referenced who doesn't know much about geropsychology. But if I can spot one pattern in all that we've talked about and create some advice based on that, I would say it's the fact that generally speaking, older people get overlooked a lot. Therefore, they appreciate time with other people that much more, especially others who are looking out for them, whether they are peers or mental health professionals. With that being said, don't do this by yourself. Keep engaging. Don't isolate yourself or waste time making some kind of protest about things not being as they once were. It's not worth it to keep fighting to the death like this. Make this age as open and free-flowing as you would your 20s. Don't let the imagery of elderly people sitting around doing nothing dictate your lifestyle, and don't let peers who start to follow that suit themselves dictate your lifestyle either. Continue to cultivate relationships as you always would, have fun like you always would, and build a supportive community around you, full of people who want to embrace life together for as long as they have it, and are willing to support one another as they're confronted with new challenges all at the same time as a group. These types of choices should be upheld no matter what age, and might be vitally important to combat the loneliness many senior citizens find themselves feeling. Many thanks to the asker for contributing such a wonderful question today. Really hope this helped her out, and everyone out there really, because these are questions we should start asking ourselves now, as soon as possible. It is vital to prepare ourselves for future stages of life, physically and mentally, yet we often can't help but to overlook doing so. And needless to say, it's important to be conscientious of others who are going through difficult stages of aging too. So I should hope that some of what was discussed today encouraged us all to rethink the daily routines of many elderly persons we might know, and what we can do to reassure them that they have both support and potential. That's going to do it for today, though, everybody. Thanks a lot for being here and for making another episode possible, and do be sure to come on back for the next one, where we will help out another listener. I'll talk to you all next time.